Welcome to episode 276 of the DFO Rundown. I'm Jason Greger, and as always, it's brought to you by Betano.ca, where you can get in the game. Of course, NHL, 7 games tonight, later Friday, and then 13 games on Saturday. You can have prop player bets, everything you like. And then, of course, Sunday, the big match, the Super Bowl, where Betano has you covered for everything you like for prop bets, the color of the Gatorade, to length of the anthem, you name it, they got it. Betano.ca.
You know what I bet on every year?
What?
The coin flip.
Well, you got a 50% chance.
It's some of the best odds you can get all day.
Probably true. What do you bet? Do you always go heads or tails?
Oh, tails never fails, buddy. You can never go with heads. And just like when I play roulette, you will never see me bet red. I do not bet red.
Really?
Once you go black, you never go back.
Mm-hmm. Black and tails is what you are, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Okay. It's February 8th when we are recording this. Exactly 1 month from the NHL trade deadline, which of course goes on Friday, March 8th. And Frank, some guys off the trade board, of course, last week with Lindholm and Monahan getting moved. And so you got the new trade targets came out, and not a big surprise, but the Calgary Flames occupying the top spots. Probably not where they want to be as an organization, but Noah Hanifin, 27 years of age, pending UFA, cap hit of $4.95 million. And then Chris Tanev is number 2. He's 34 years of age, $4.5 million AAV in the final year of his deal. Hanifin's age, I would think, would likely make him more attractive to a team, especially if you can re-sign him. But, Chris Tanev is definitely maybe more of a defensive specialist over Hanifin. So, you look at these two teams and Toronto beat Dallas again last night. It's still like that would be an obvious team. Which other teams do you see interested in Hanifin?
Oh, I mean, the fascinating part about Hanifin is that we also now have some pretty good indication based on the way his negotiation went of what his market looks like. So no one's really going in blind. I think the understanding was that he was looking at an 8-year deal for $60 million flat, which would be $7.5 a year.
Yeah.
The Flames put that on the table. They were waiting at the end of the aisle, but he got cold feet and didn't sign it.
Yeah.
So they're awaiting word this week. It's not a stone cold mortal lock that he gets moved, even though he's the new number 1. But for me, he's the premier defenseman available on the rental market, and he's going to stay there until he signs a new deal.
Yeah, makes sense. I get why. Now we've seen guys come down to the wire, and obviously if he doesn't get a new deal, I'm guessing Calgary's got no choice. They're going to have to trade him. I don't think they'd want to risk having him walk away in the summer like Johnny Gaudreau did for absolutely nothing. So it makes sense in that regard. Now, Chris Tanev, you think doesn't seem like there's much negotiation there. Like Tanev is more of a lock, do you think, to be dealt? Or what if Hanifin doesn't re-sign? Do you think they could pivot and re-sign Tanev instead?
Oh, I think Tanev is a lock to be traded. I just think with where they're heading, knowing that they're probably not going to be they may be a playoff team next year, but they're not going to be a contending team the next couple years until they can, get moving in a different direction, which they're now well on their way after these trades. I mean, think about what Craig Conroy has turned Tyler Toffoli, Nikita Zadorov, and Elias Lindholm into in just 8 months. If they're also moving Hanifin and Tanev, like you've got a stockpile now from which you can deal. And that's a pretty intoxicating feeling, I'd imagine. But Tanev just doesn't fit their timeline to me. And as much as they like him, I think the value is elsewhere. It doesn't really make a lot of sense for them to re-sign him. And I'll add Ottawa into the mix too. Like it's been bizarre to hear. Like I get coveting Chris Tanev, but why would you trade for him now when you could potentially just wait and get him in the summer?
Guess depends if it'd be like trading for his rights earlier, except, what's the cost going to be for Tanev? I'm kind of curious about, right?
It's a second.
Yeah. Wow. So, like we've seen guys in the past, Frank, you trade for their rights a week or two before, and sometimes it's a fifth, sometimes it's a fourth and stuff like that. So maybe if they value them that much, they say, let's just bite the bullet and not risk it. Now, I can see the counter argument and say, well, just wait and offer a fifth or a fourth to a team at that point. But I think there's also the risk of if a team that acquires Chris Tanev gets him and they have some playoff success, how guys are like, oh, well, now I've been here for a few months. I kind of like it. More likely to re-sign there.
Yeah, I get it. I guess my thing is I would just wait and see how he plays. I'd want to see the whole thing start to finish if I'm an acquiring team on Tanev. Where is he at? How much impact do you think he can make? And then the next thing is cost, because it's not, even though it's probably shorter term, it's not going to be cheap. It's still probably in the $4 to $4.5 million range a year. Like, I don't think he's not at the point in his career. He hasn't made a pile of money like Mark Giordano where he could sign in Toronto for minimum or $900,000. Can't walk away from that extra coin on a year-to-year basis. I just think Calgary's in such an enviable position to be in. You've got the potentially best rental defenseman, then the next best rental defenseman in Tanev. And I wonder how much the Shillington return has changed their perspective a little bit when it comes to Hanifin. At the time that they offered Hanifin in October and were close to signing him, Shillington was in the country, but not anywhere close to coming back to play. Now that he's back, if you can go, and he's still also a pending UFA and no guarantee that he comes back, but if you are to keep him and you could go Weegar, Anderson, Shillington, that at least covers you off a lot better than only having two of those guys, which I think was part of the reason why they really were pushing to keep Hanifin is, hey, look, if we're really looking at 2 to 3 years from now, we could maybe replace 2 to 3 defensemen on our roster, but it's going to be hard to replace 4 of them in a 2-year period of time of guys that we really believe in that can make a difference. So I think Calgary's in a great spot now. They could keep Hanifin and they're well solidified for the future. And if not, they're going to get a haul. He's by far the most impactful rental defenseman available.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Now, you've moved Jake Guentzal way down your list because he's not officially.
He's always been way down at the bottom. Yeah, FYI.
And he, until the Penguins, I think, are really, like, to me, if he's getting traded, it likely happens in 48 hours before the deadline, right? They look at where they're at, and we see they got games in hand on Pittsburgh. They had a huge win coming out of the break, shutting out Winnipeg. And it's funny, Frank, I was looking at the Penguins when they decide to play. Like, they dominated Vegas in a game. They've dominated, and that was before Vegas was hurt. And they dominated Winnipeg in a game. And they had they shut out another top team. I don't know if it's Boston. I can't remember who. But either way, like some top teams. Then, of course, they'll soil themselves doing other things. And really, if their power play, if their power play was just average, not great, just average, how many more wins would they have? And so they score the 2 goals on the PP against Winnipeg. And I don't see Guentzal getting moved. I just think Pittsburgh is, now some can say it's a bad move, and I understand that, but I just don't see them wanting to just give away the season, because I still believe if you get to the postseason in the East, Frank, I don't care what seed number you are this year, I don't see a dominant lock team to say, okay, it's going to be really hard. Like the 2 wildcard teams in the West are going to have a much harder team against Vancouver or Colorado or Dallas or Winnipeg than like the New York Rangers. Are they unbeatable? No. Heck, Shesterkin's not even their starter right now. Jonathan Quick's running the show in New York. Obviously, it's temporary, but still, right? So that's why I could see why Pittsburgh's like, let's just get in.
That's why I think it's going to come all the way down to March 8th. I think they've got plenty of time. Look, Kyle Dubas worked under Lou Lamoriello. If you have time, use it. That's his slogan.
Yeah, makes sense.
Why wouldn't you wait until the very last minute possible to make that determination one way or the other? There's no reason why you can't field calls in between now and then to at least have teams express their interest so you know what the market looks like or have some idea of who you're calling in the last 72 hours before the deadline. But what if they are in the same spot that they are right now? They're basically 1 win away on points percentage from being in. And to your point, the East is pretty open. And more than that, they're so committed to this core with the contracts they have. And frankly, what they've giving up the first round pick for Karlsson, they already don't have it.
Yeah.
You've spent your assets. So me personally, I think if you're out 72 hours, even if it's 3 points, I think you have to trade Jake Guentzal. And I think you have to take a hard line stand, because after Guentzal, the next big question is who on your Penguins roster is going to bring you any sort of return in a trade. And I'm not including Sidney Crosby in that group because I don't think he's getting traded at any point. Tell me among your team, maybe at some point as a pending UFA or something, or if you really get creative, you could move Evgeny Malkin. Tell me who on this team is going to generate a return for them outside of Guentzal that's going to kickstart the rebuild, because they are heading for the longest period of darkness that we're going to see in the NHL since the Oilers.
I'll tell you, Chicago's a long way from seeing the light.
I disagree.
Okay. Wow.
They've already done the hardest thing. They've got the franchise centerpiece. How many teams meander forever and end up with just guys?
I know.
We had top picks. We had a not knocking on the Rangers and they've played fine, but like there's a big difference between getting Connor Bedard and getting Alexis Lafreniere. So they've done the hardest thing you can do, which is get it's a lot easier to fill out. I know the Oilers are proof of how hard it is, but it's a lot easier to recruit talent when you are a big market, big spending team where people want to play and live. Just look at this summer and how active the Hawks are going to be. They're not going to have a massive turnaround for next season, but 2025-26, that's the year that you're going to see the Hawks on the rise.
Well, considering the Hawks now, if it wasn't for COVID, Frank, the Hawks, this would be year number 8 of missing the playoffs, right? So next year will be 9. So I could see if maybe they start to see some light. The COVID.
What's the two things the Hawks and Pens have in common?
Well, they got Bedard.
Well, right? No, they've both won 3 Stanley Cups prior to entering the period of darkness.
Yeah. Oh no, and that's what I'm saying. But
that's also a big differentiator, right?
Yes. Oh God, yeah. No, Edmonton's was terrible. There's no trust me, it'd be hard to be worse than that. But I look at Chicago, and after Connor Bedard, you can go out and you can sign veterans, but how many really quality veterans are there every year in free agency, right? And you can overpay guys and get good players, good character guys like Nick Foligno, and I understand all of that. But at the end of the day, like I've always said, Bedard was really the start of their rebuild. Kevin Korchinski, maybe if you want to say, is year 1 of their top picks. Bedard's only number 2. So they're going to have a lot of picks coming. I won't be surprised if there's another 3 years without playoffs in Chicago at all, which means they'll probably have 3 outdoor games in the meantime between then. So, but
let's make a wager, because yesterday was 3 years to the day since we dropped our first DFO rundown, episode 1. Paul Maurice was our first guest. If we're still doing this in 2026, what can I wager with you that the Blackhawks make the playoffs that year?
So they're making the playoffs, you're saying, in 2 years from like today. 2 years from now, they'll be in a playoff run, and then they're going to make it.
Yeah, I think they're going to be one of the last teams in.
I don't know. It's a long ways away for a bet.
Yeah. Well, I'm just throwing it out there. We got plenty of time to discuss the terms.
Well, we'll discuss the parameters.
But that's I'm feeling it. It's going to happen.
All right. A few guys, I was looking at your trade rate board, Frank, and you look at Philadelphia's interesting one, right? John Tortorella felt lack of practice, lots of games. Their team was getting tired. They lost 5 in a row. They come back, they win their first game, but you still have 2 Flyers. And they've said it before on the record is, hey, where we're at in our rebuild, there'll be some guys who get moved that maybe you don't think so. And they have 2 of them in your top 10, Sean Walker, Scott Lawton. What about Konechny? Do you think there's what would it take for them? I know you've talked about it, but you don't have them on your list. So is your discussion you think that they're not interested in moving him right now?
I mean, I don't know. I don't think they're dying to move him or anything like that. I think it would take an incredible offer. And I think with a player of Konechny's stature, it makes way more sense to involve double the field of potential teams in the summer if you're really going to do it. I get the idea of having him for an additional playoff run, but I don't think the price difference between now at the deadline and Konechny in the summer is going to be different. And I think they have to have something left. They have to have a common thread that fans can buy into. And, you're starting to see a little bit of that, like Owen Tippett signing his long-term deal. Konechny obviously he's been really the heartbeat of that team. And to remove him, I think it would send a tough message to the marketplace more than some of the other guys. That I think they're real conscious of that. They like what they've built. There has to be some sort of tie over.
That's fair. Now the one guy you don't have on your list, Frank, is the one guy I would have on my list because I don't think they can get back in it. The New Jersey Devils and Tyler Toffoli, right? He's won his cup. He's having a great year. He had a very good year last year. Now maybe they don't want to just, move him right away or not because they feel like, hey, let's just try to re-sign him first. So I understand that. But I think he's a player that have lots of interest for teams, right? Especially if the Devils are retaining salary.
Yeah, but they're another team that's 1 win away from being in. Quite literally on points percentage.
Well, no, because even if they won both of their games, they would still be 1 point back of Detroit. So, right, because they're 5 back with 2 games in hand. So, you're right. I get that they're
3 games in hand on Tampa. Tampa's at 578 points percentage. New Jersey's at 552, and they just got Jack Hughes back. I just think it's too early. So
that's fair.
The point is, first off, people get twisted. Trade targets is a living, breathing list. So if Noah Hanifin were to sign today,
he's obviously off the list.
Right. But more than that, it's too early on some of these guys. I think the Devils, more than the Penguins, owe it to themselves after what they gave up for Toffoli to see it through. See how the dynamic changes with Jack Hughes back. Are you going to spend some of the Dougie Hamilton money to improve your defense? What about your goaltending? And if so, to your point, the sooner the Devils act, the better. Waiting closer to March 8th is not going to help them. It's certainly not going to help them make a decision on Toffoli.
No. Well, I'll say this, Frank. I know you're watching the game last night. The East is really wide open with teams. The Flyers, the Lightning, the Red Wings, everybody's in it. And Sergachev last night, I don't know if you saw him after the game. So Sergachev, anybody who wasn't watching the game, he goes down on a reverse hit. Looked like he hurt his ankle. He just came back, and then he took to his own social media post and said, quote, "Oh man, why me? Why now? After all the games missed, coming back and getting injured again feels unfair. Feels terrible. Trying to stay calm and positive, but it's impossible. After doing everything right, I get this. The universe is unpredictable and has its own plan. But fuck the universe, man. I know I'll come back stronger and I know I'll play better than before, but it's tough right now and it's going to be tough tomorrow." So obviously doesn't sound like it's a short-term injury for Sergachev on the back end for Tampa Bay.
It looked like his ankle snapped for sure.
Yeah.
It was a gruesome. Do not watch that in slow motion. That's tough. I mean, I wonder, for a Tampa team that was already looking for defense, does this spell a death knell to their season? And I say that for a team that's in a playoff spot, but Sergachev getting him back was a huge part of their push. And now with 2 holes to fill, do you suddenly sit back and say it might not be worth the assets to do it?
Well, they've never done it yet, right? Brisebois has never he's never been hesitant to make big moves. So
they haven't done it yet, but it doesn't mean they won't.
Right.
That's a huge difference between then and now.
But they're guys that, like, look at you got Nikita Kucherov for 3 more years after this. Braden Point has another 6 years after this. Sergachev's on a big deal. Cernak's on a big deal. Vasilevsky's got 4 years after this. Like, I know Steven Stamkos is a UFA, but Cirelli's long-term. Nick Paul's long-term. Braden Hagel's long-term. Like, I just don't see them, Frank, putting out now maybe for 1 year and they say, okay, but who could you trade? Like, if you're Tampa, you don't really have a lot of assets that you would move unless you're moving Steven Stamkos, right? But there's no one else even on
he already said publicly he's not doing that.
Yeah, exactly.
And that was one of those situations where I saw the quote and I was like, that's odd that anyone would even think of it as new. Like, it never was even on my radar that Steven Stamkos could be a guy that could move. Yeah. And
so they don't have anybody, is my point. Like, I don't. But assets are you moving?
I'm not saying trade away. I'm just saying, what if you just stand pat? That was my point.
Yeah.
Why do you, doesn't the Tanner Jeannot trade from last year stand out as really poor?
Well, yeah. And they already don't have a first and a second this year, and they don't have a first and 25.
Well, yeah, because you traded a first, second, third, fourth, and fifth plus Cal Foote for Jeannot last year. He's got 6 goals this year.
Yeah.
I know he's hurt right now, but 6 goals. So the other common thread was the last couple years, if you look back in their playbook, they traded for Hagel, who had term, gave up a lot to get him, but then extended him. Nick Paul traded for him, extended him, 7-year deal. Like, if you're going to see Julien Brisebois make a splash, which I'm not convinced he is, especially after the Sergachev, if he's going to trade for someone, it's either someone with term or someone that he can readily extend.
Probably. Yeah. Or if he could get just a defenseman, Frank, for a mid-round pick, I could see him doing something like that. Not a massive turn. And if Chris Tanev's only a second, like, what is Matt Dumba gonna require? Right? Like, maybe they just so maybe they just say, hey, you know what? We'll bring in Matt Dumba. We know Sergachev's out, and now I know different side, all that. I understand it, but still,
I could see that making sense.
Yeah, there
are. Are there other teams in that mode that you think, like, where do you come out on the Leafs?
Oh,
should they be a team that right now should be, if you're not ready to make a splash, nibble around the edges?
Well, I think they have to add a defenseman for sure, maybe 2. I'd also think it's at some point you can't just play 6 forwards. Can't do it. You got to have some trust in some of your other players, I would think, and that'd be just me though. Is
it trust or lack of production?
Well, I get, chicken and the egg formula for sure, right? But if guys are struggling, Frank, playing them less isn't going to help them struggle less. You know what I mean?
Well, we've seen that.
Yeah. So, but I still think, the Leafs, like, their big guns score. There's no question about that. But I still think they have to improve their back end.
But here's the thing. I think Brad Treliving is, not only has he been active, but he's willing to be aggressive and trade the first round pick, but only if he can kill multiple birds with one stone.
Now, if you're saying like the Tanev's only a second, I'd be curious as to why wouldn't Toronto jump on that already? Like, you don't have to give up your first. They don't have a second.
They don't have a second for 3 years. That's their problem. And Calgary has said to Toronto, we know you're interested, but since you don't have a second, it's not going the other way. The price is a first. And so then I think the conversation has been, well, if it is a first, what would we need to add to get Tanev and Hanifin?
Well, that would be a blockbuster.
And in that case, you could see it making sense. Like, okay, if you're going to trade the first, then you might as well at least, and then you could, if you had the inkling to re-sign Hanifin, not Tanev.
Yeah. Yeah, because Calgary doesn't want, like, they wouldn't take 2 lower picks, like they wouldn't take 2/3 instead of 1 second.
No. There's that doesn't equate on the draft value chart.
No.
And not when other teams are offering a second. Why would you?
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, no, that's fair. So, but the other name on your board, like when you go through the board and you look at guys that you think could be quiet, like you have 2 goalies in the top 10 and Jake Allen and Marc-Andre Fleury. And when you look at the goaltending market, it's, you know, it's obviously unstable. I think Colorado is still one that would seem like an obvious one to me, to like they need a goalie to me sooner than later, simply because you don't want to overplay Georgiev more than you already have, right? So to me, that's the one.
That's the one where Marc-Andre Fleury makes so much sense.
Yeah, 100%.
He wants to play. He wants to contribute. Like if he's going to raise his hand and move, which is not a lock, he doesn't want to just sit there and be a cheerleader who smiles and opens up the door. He's a competitor. He wants to play. If you know that you've played Georgiev too much, and Chris McFarland has admitted as such that they'd like him to be closer to 55 games than be on track for 66 like he is, that he's the perfect guy down the stretch to do it. Plus the additional playoff insurance along the way. And by the way, Georgiev's, because he's played so much, his numbers are not out of this world. Like it's not a foregone conclusion to say that Fleury with equal play, does he have a chance to supplant Georgiev? I think the answer to that would be yes.
Yeah. So
unlikely, but it would at least you'd have to consider it if it happened.
Be an option, because outside of Colorado, like maybe LA, Vancouver doesn't need a goalie. I don't think Edmonton's really in the market for a goalie at this point. Dallas, no. Winnipeg, no. Vegas, no. So you look at LA, it's maybe, and Colorado in the West. In the East, you go down the list of teams. Philadelphia, I think would be in one, obviously, with Carter Hart gone if they wanted one.
Nope,
right?
They like Sam Ersson.
Yeah, but even just a backup is all I'm saying. Right?
They have Cal Peterson.
Oh yeah, I guess yeah.
They don't need him.
They look at Rangers, no. The Islanders, no. Pittsburgh, no. Carolina, yes. Right, there's only a few teams that I look at that I think need goalies, right? So Carolina,
what about Toronto? Are you comfortable with Samsonov?
I think with their 3, I think if I'm Toronto and I'm looking to move assets, like I guess if I can get my defenseman first and I still have room, then I would look. But to me, their main priority first is defense rather than goaltending. They've got 3 goalies, right?
Yeah.
Wall's not out for the year.
No, I really like Joe Woll. And
so I don't see a goalie there.
I think the market for Fleury is probably a third.
Yeah. Colorado it makes too much sense for me.
But Carolina would make a lot.
Yes. I don't sleep on the Hurricanes either. Those are the only 3 teams I see potentially. But the thing is, like, David Rittich, Frank, has played really well given the opportunity. I know that people will look and say, hey, I don't know, but let's be honest. At this time last year, no one in their right mind thought Adin Hill was going to be Adin Hill. Yeah. Goaltending, it's so weird from year to year. And so Rittich,
what about New Jersey?
Yeah, I guess you could throw in the Devils too. That's fair. But like you said, I don't think the Devils, if they do it, they're going to be, now we could argue that maybe it'd be better to do it sooner, because if you wait too long, then your goaltending's not good. By then it hasn't improved your lot in the playoff race. But yeah, Devils I'd put in as a 4th team. That's fair.
If I'm New Jersey and I'm trading for a goalie, I'd want someone that has a little bit of term. I want stability.
Jake Allen?
Jake Allen would make sense to me. So would...
What about Merzlikins?
Nah, I wouldn't want that much term, that much dollars. That's the great thing about Montreal and the spot that they're in with Jake Allen. The key to the Sean Monahan trade was that they didn't retain money. Mm-hmm. And now they have one spot left open So if it's retaining on Allen, great. And if not, they're going to use it to help facilitate a trade before the deadline on March 8th that they could be pretty aggressive now. If you eat half on Allen, you get him down to 1 something. That's a pretty attractive deal for a couple years for a guy that's been really rather consistent and hasn't played with a great team in front of him.
Yeah. And the Joel Edmondson retainer falls off at the end of this season. So then they get a new one starting again next year.
Yep.
And because they're probably in a similar position. So
yep.
It's it's interesting with all the trade talk a month out, which teams are looking at what. And I always like to look at the trade bait board for guys I think that can be impact guys that can help your team, because it's not always the big swing, to be honest, right? It's just looking for depth guys that you feel can get hot at the right time. Like I still like Vladdy Tarasenko, man. There's something about Tarasenko that I wonder that Ottawa's probably going to retain half. You get rid of him. I don't think he's commanding a big return, Frank. I think there's a chance that there's a guy who, I'm talking about scoring key goals. There's not many better shooters available than Tarasenko.
I think that's fair. He also holds all the cards, which is part of the problem. He has a full no trade.
Yeah.
And he just fired his agent and hired another one for the second time in 7 months. He went with teammate Brady Tkachuk's uncle, Craig Oster of Newport Sports. So what's his end game there?
Yeah.
What's he trying to do? Is he trying to get out? Is he trying to stay there? Typically you don't fire your agent unless you're looking to do something different.
Yes. Yeah. So that's fair. And the other guy that he doesn't get talked about a lot around, circles, but I'm telling you, if you're looking for a role player, Nick Dowd from the Washington Capitals, I wouldn't be surprised, Frank, if he ends up getting bigger returns. Some people are like, what? Nick Dowd got that? I think
it would be a first-round pick.
Yeah, he offers a lot for some
people's heads explode when I say that, but that's what the price would be for Nick Dowd. First-round pick.
Yeah, well, because he's got term, right? He's not just a UFA.
Yeah, and I know he's not a center, but one guy I'd give a real long look to is Brandon Duhaime of the Wild. He is the prototype bottom 6 winger for a playoff team. He flies.
Yeah.
He forechecks his ass off, has edge and grit, and he chips in the odd goal every now and again. Last year, he's at 9 goals, and he barely makes any money.
Mm-hmm. That's the key.
So what can you get if you're Minnesota? Can you get a second-round pick?
Yeah, and to me, that's where I'm always torn, right? Like, yeah, you look at the potential and the odds of what a second-round pick will be. Are they going to be better than the Duhaime? Right now he is a UFA, so maybe that's what they're worried about and all that stuff, that he's just going to walk anyway.
Well, yeah, he just went through arbitration with them.
Yeah,
and you're going to need to pay him to stay. I think if you're Mini, what you do is cash in on the pick if you can and try and create another Brandon Duhaime somewhere else.
Yeah, he did have 9 goals last year, but he had 10 points, right? Like, how much is he going to get in free agency would be my question, right? Like, is he really going to be that much more expensive?
I think he's always re-sign him.
Yeah, well, I guess. Yeah, how often does that happen? We talk about it all the time, but how many guys?
Hardly ever.
Exactly. So, usually, teams.
By the way, I also, speaking of that, I wouldn't rule out Monahan coming back to Montreal. I'm not saying it's likely, but I think that they'd be interested in that.
Yeah, see, don't you think the Jets are interested in re-signing him?
They should be.
Yeah.
That's Rick Bowness. I mean, I know it's one game, but Rick Bowness raved about him.
Oh, and he's played in Canada lots. He likes it. So, the Jets, clearly there's an opening right there. Like, to me, the minute the trade went down, I said, man, it makes a lot of sense to see a re-sign right there. Right? Like, to me, this is Paul Stastny all over.
Yeah.
Just a different player.
If you get a chance, go back and watch our Daily Face-Off live from Monday. We had John Goyens on, he does a lot of the Habs games on color on radio. So he's
Yeah.
seen Monahan all year, but he's unreal at breaking down film. And he showed all the different spots that the Jets have struggled on their 24th ranked power play because they don't have someone to play the bumper position. And Monahan has executed that so well this year for the Habs. The video was excellent to explain why he's the perfect fit. In addition to being a 200-foot guy that has had a great season, just the bumper power play position alone, if he can improve them half in the standings to go from 24th to 12th, they'll be that much more of a dangerous team, especially when it comes to the playoffs.
Now, what about the top teams, Frank? None of their players are on the trade bait board, obviously, but when you look at, like Vegas and what they would be interested in, I think most people know what Edmonton's looking at. You look at a team like Dallas, for instance, or Boston or the Rangers. How busy do you think these top teams are going to be at the deadline?
I think the Rangers are going to be pretty aggressive. There was a report out there that the Rangers weren't interested in moving their first round pick because they're hosting the draft at the Sphere and the Rangers owner owns the Sphere, that the Rangers want to, make a big splash at the draft. I wouldn't put that much stock into that. I don't think the Rangers are going to let the draft being at the Sphere get in the way of improving their team. That's the way I would explain it. So we know that they were after Lindholm. We know that they probably need 2 centers.
Yeah.
Where can they mine those guys that will be really good fits, and what's the price? That's really what New York's looking at. And wouldn't be shocked to also see them grab a winger. Maybe 1 center and a winger. Think back to the last couple years. Tarasenko right side.
Yeah.
Patrick Kane right side. Like it's easy to see it there.
Before we get to Tyler, I saw you tweet out, Frank. The Arizona Coyotes, you'd mentioned on Monday's pod how you thought there was a third option of someone else coming in and potentially offering to buy the team. And turns out it's a guy who's wheeled and dealed. And I know he bought more Suns games on free cable in Arizona, and fans were loving it. So what do you make? I saw your tweet last night.
Are you a Suns fan, by the way?
I like the Suns. Yeah. I've been to their games because we were there, but I wouldn't say I'm a Suns fan. No, I like their team, but I'm not like a fan.
Mm-hmm. I don't think Matt Ishbia, the owner of the Suns, is part of this. And I'm not saying he won't be and not ever, but I don't think he's in the mix now, and I don't really think it's on their radar. I think whatever's playing out with the Coyotes, which it's really kind of hard to handicap because what you begin to get into is a franchise issue in and of itself, where the league has been really clear with Arizona. You need to present us your concrete plan, and not just hey, well, we're going to do this. No, these are the steps that we've taken to put shovels and steel in the ground on a new arena. They need a concrete plan, and they don't have one. And to my knowledge, they aren't really close to one. And you heard Marty Walsh put them on blast that at some point the league is going to have to step in and say, whatever the situation, however it plays itself out, whether you sell the team yourself to someone else and it relocates, we force you to sell the team, or you sell the team to us, whatever happens next, there's something coming in Arizona, and soon. And I reported earlier this week, potentially as soon as this weekend. But it's happening. They're on the clock. And I'm not saying they're absolutely relocating, because I've outlined a couple ways in which they could stay, including selling the team to another owner who then privately, that's why Matt Ishbia from the Suns came up, which would be, hey, park the team at Footprint Center where the Suns play, improve the ice plant as a temporary solution. You're going to overnight almost quadruple the attendance for the Coyotes. at least in terms of available seats.
Yes.
Moving from Mullet Arena, have that be a temporary stopgap for a couple years. And in the meantime, Matt Ishbia having both teams in his portfolio is a lot easier to negotiate with. And he has a lot more incentive on his own right to build a new arena privately where you don't need to rely on government sources for land or something like that to get something done. And so that was the thought process. Now, unless there's some other mystery Arizona businessman that steps up and is willing, or business person is willing to step up and buy the team and do all that privately, it seems like the only other option then is to move the team.
Yeah. I wonder if they would, if they're relocating, they would announce it, so the fans get one final game, or would they prefer to do it differently like they did with Atlanta? I wonder. So not sure if that.
I mean, look, here's the truth. A lot of the tickets, I'd imagine, for the Coyotes for the rest of the season are already sold since it is a small arena, right?
Yeah.
That you're probably not going to experience a huge hit. There might be some nostalgia of, like you said, going to see a team, or if you're an opposing fan, like Tyler and the Nation Vacation, they wanted to make sure they got to Mullet Arena before the viewing situation changes, and it's a unique experience in a small environment to see an NHL team. I don't think you're going to run into like what the Oakland A's did last year, where you're getting 437 people at a game.
Yeah.
Could be wrong.
Let's bring in Tyler Yaremchuk to the program. Ty, how you doing?
I'm doing good, boys. Ready to roll with a new edition of Buy or Sell, which is, as always, delivered by DoorDash. For a limited time, our Canadian listeners can get 25% off and zero delivery fees on their first order of $15 or more. All you need to do is download the DoorDash app and enter the promo code Nation25. Let's take a little bit of a break from the trade talk. I got this one for you to kick off Buy or Sell. Brendan Dillon getting 3 games was too damn high. Buy or sell, Greggs?
I'll sell. You know what? It's a headshot. Now, it wasn't nearly as bad as Gallagher. Let's make that abundantly clear, right? That's in the course of a play. You're going for a hit. The fact the helmet pops off, it's kind of hard to argue that it wasn't contact to the head.
I will buy. I think this, if you were going to do it, it's a 1-game suspension. And part of it is, look, I understand the point that Department of Player Safety made in the video, which is they think it's on Brendan Dillon with the angle of attack that he takes. Me personally, watching that hit in real time, I don't think anyone loves the end result, which is a player who obviously has been hit to the head. I just look at that play and I say, man, it looks like a hockey play to me. Like, he didn't stick his arm out or his elbow. It's a hard shoulder, and it's unfortunate, but I personally, I was pretty comfortable with this hit in real time, and I thought the major and getting kicked out of the game was enough for me.
Yeah, that's kind of where I came out on it as well. I was surprised to see him get more than a game. I thought even 2 would have been extreme. All right, moving along to the next one. You guys know I love talking about 50 goal scorers. Last year, we got 5 of them in the NHL. So far this season, we have 8 players who are on pace. And it's roughly 8 because Brock Besser is on pace for like 49.4, but I'm including him in the conversation. You got Matthews, Reinhart, Pasternak, McKinnon, Kucherov, Panarin, Besser, and Zach Hyman with 30 goals in 45 games so far this season. I'm going to say 4 of those players end up hitting the 50 goal mark. Buy or sell, Frank?
I'm going to sell. I think 7 of the 8. The guy that I don't think is going to get there is going to be Besser. I think he's going to slow down a bit. And it's been an unreal year for him, but he's already slightly south of the pace, and it's not really going to take that much more. You have a 5-game run where you don't, you score once. All of a sudden it's really going to drop. And I feel pretty confident health-wise. I mean, look at Matthews and Reinhart are most of the way there.
Yeah.
McKinnon, no doubt. For me, I think it would be the first time he hits 50 in his career, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Panarin. I mean, Panarin is maybe the real surprise. Is he not? I mean, Besser, let me park that. Besser is a huge surprise based on the way the last couple years went. But Panarin is not, he's not typically been a goal scorer. He's been an assist guy.
Yeah, he's got.
I mean, Panarin's already, this is already his career high.
Yeah.
Think about that. We're only we're 51 games into the season. He's one off of his career high.
Jay, I'm going with 450 goal scorers. Are you buying or selling on that?
Well, Matthews, Reinhart, and Pasternak are for sure. I think McKinnon, the way he's playing. Now, him and Kucherov, neither one of them has ever scored more than 42. So, for both of those guys, it's going to be career years in goals too. I don't see Panarin getting there. Frank just outlined all the reasons why I don't think he's going to get there because we've never seen him score like this before. So, Besser, I agree. His numbers have slowed down. Zach Hyman's, obviously his career high is only 36. So I'm going to go 50 is hard, man. I will say 5.
All right. It's interesting to see a guy like Brock Besser as well. He's got 3 hat tricks on the season, one of which was a 4-goal game. So 10 of his goals already this season have come in a 3-game span, I guess you could kind of say. Nathan McKinnon also has 2 4-goal games already this year. No hat tricks, just 2 4-goal games for Nate Mack as well. So I was digging through some numbers a little bit.
So technically that would be 2 hat tricks.
Yeah, I know. But you know what I'm saying? He hasn't finished with 3. He has 2 4-goal games, no 3-goal games, which is just kind of a weird thing.
Panarin, by the way, has 4 in his last 6. So not really slowing down.
All right, let's wrap up with one more trade-related one. We've already seen 2 first-round picks get moved in the last month. I'm going to say we will see at least 4 more first-round picks move before the deadline. Buy or sell, Greggs?
4 more?
4 more, Frank. Come on, let's get aggressive.
4 more. Oof. Well,
2 in the East, 2 in the West.
Nope.
No, unless there's some guys like my caveat to that is unless there's a team that suddenly has a Matthias Ekholm-like player who's, got lots of term left, like John Carlson in Washington. I'll use him as an example. He's got 2 years extra. What if John Carlson, the Caps, you know what? They have, I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm just saying that would be a player that could command a first, right? He's got terms.
Right. Where did this name come from? Like, did you just pull this out of your ass?
No, I was looking at guys like who are guys on bad teams that like Kuznetsov's gone, like Washington's going in the ditch, man. Like, let's be honest.
Kuznetsov is in the program. He's not going. He's not.
I know,
but
Backstrom left. Ovechkin's really slowed down. They're getting old. I'm just saying if there was a guy that would fit the bill, I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm just saying that's the guy, right? So you have to look at teams because on Frank's list, I think Noah Hanifin could get a first. And like after that, guys, I'm not
Scott
sure.
Lawton, I think, gets a first.
Lawton, you think gets a first? Okay.
100%. If Sean Monahan's getting a first, Scott Lawton's getting a first.
Okay.
He's got term.
He's got term and he's better.
Got term. Okay. So that's
maybe
2.
Not as impactful offensively, but he does a lot more.
All right, Frank,
I'm gonna sell. I will say there's not gonna be 4 more.
So Hanifin, Henrique, Lawton, that's 3.
And 1 deal for a future or for a guy with term that we're maybe not.
Yeah, I'm gonna buy. Yeah. So I'll add in. I was originally selling all day, but those 3 I think are locks if they get traded, which is not the lock. But then it only takes 1 additional person that we're not really thinking of, like a new guy on my board that hasn't been brought up at all is Pavel Buchnevich. He's been unreal in St. Louis. Is there a more unheralded player that's been a point per game guy?
When I read your trade targets this morning and I saw that line, I was like, holy shit, he is a point per game guy. You go
182 points in 183 games since joining the Blues.
So why are you trading him?
Because they're not going to pay him. They're just not. Doug Armstrong got him from the Rangers because the Rangers weren't going to pay him as an RFA. He only gave up a 2nd-round pick to get him.
Yeah. So but my question would be this hey, you just outlined why you should pay him. He's productive.
No, but that's the thing. He's turning 30. Your team's not great. So would you pay Pavel Buchnevich $8 million a year on a long-term deal?
Well, not long-term. See, that's the key. And I think
why does he have any incentive to take short-term? So here's my point in a nutshell. The Blues aren't going to be the team that gives Buchnevich $60-some million. I don't think. That's just my personal opinion, which is why he's on the board. Rival teams are looking at that roster going, hey, that's a guy that potentially, if we made the right offer, 2 years of Buchnevich this year and next at 5'8" at a point per game guy, that's your Jake Guentzal that no one's talking about. And he's got term.
Yeah.
All right, there you go. Vindication for me is I finally got you guys to buy on one of my ideas. I'm going to treat myself by ordering DoorDash for breakfast. That's a wrap on buy or sell. See you, boys.
Double dash that for the win.
Like
Did you hear me? I said double dash that for the win.
Yeah, well, I know. I heard it. But like Buchnevich, that's the other thing. Like you're trading him now. Why? Like the Blues are close. Now I get that they're probably not a deep playoff run, but guy's really productive. He's got 1 year left.
But if you're not going to be, if you're going to be in the same malaise next year and you're not going to pay him anyway.
But at 31, I don't think he's getting 8 years. I don't even think he's getting 7 years when his deal's done.
He's not 31.
It'll be 30, sorry, when his deal's done, won't he?
Yes.
Yeah, sorry.
He's 28 now. So
yeah,
this
but
year, next year is his 29 year. 30 would be
when he starts
of his first year.
Yeah, so
he's getting at least 6 years.
Yeah, probably.
Are you going to give him $8 million a year, 8.5?
But he's a player to me that has shown, given more opportunity, he's productive, right? And NHL players now, he doesn't have a lot of wear on it, like a lot of tread going on his tires. He hasn't even played 500 games yet at the age of 30. Like he doesn't seem to me like a player that's going to hit 32 and just hit the skids. You know what I mean?
No, you are making my point for me as to why he should be traded.
Well, why? I don't understand why teams give up good players. We're like, hey, here's a guy who's productive for us. We think he's going to be productive for 5 years.
A haul for a guy that you don't have intentions on paying.
Yeah, I guess. Like, I think the Blues might have. That was what their intentions were with Pietrangelo. How'd that work out? I guess that would be my point, right? They clearly misread the market significantly, the importance of him to your team. And I don't know, like they've signed all these other guys. Maybe it's like, wow, geez, we don't want to sign the one guy. I'm like, yeah, but he's the most productive guy. Doesn't make sense to me.
Okay.
Like, hey, I could get why a team would want him, though. You're right. At 5.8 mil, he's a really good value player for 2 playoff runs. That's the advantage. But the odds that a late first round pick becomes Buchnevich, it's pretty low if you're the Blues. So we'll see. Frankie, have yourself a good weekend. We will chat with you on Lundy. Before we go, Frank, are you still in? Did you last or are you out?
No. I suck at the Wendy's Daily Face-Off Survivor Pool again.
Oh, it's so awesome. People could, like, I think I'm going to join now. And I think my goal is I'm going to join next week and see if I can catch Frank. And all of the listeners, just sign up, go to dailyfaceoff.com in the Wendy's Survivor Pool. And how many right do you get? Because it's a total, right? What do you got? 7?
I don't know. I don't even know. It's not even enough to be a threat.
All right. Maybe Ty and I will sign up just to see if we can make a late run to catch Frank. That'll be our goal at the Wendy's Survivor Pool. Sign up, people. That'll be our goal. See if we can catch Frank. Have a good one. Do some studying on the weekend, Frank, so maybe you can last till Wednesday next week in the Survivor Pool.